Should be on. Thank you very much. So, hello everybody. My name is TOMASZ. TUREK. I actually come from Poland, and I represent Veeam software here. So, if any of you know Veeam, not sure, anybody has heard of Veeam, knows Veeam as a company? Usually the question is what we are doing here, because this is an IT security conference and Veeam is a, well, as we call ourselves, data management company, right? So we do backups, we do replication, we do offsite, we do high availability, monitoring. So basically not something that you would consider really an ITSEC conference material, right? But the part of the backup that I wanted to talk to you about today is connected strictly with data. It's like putting the mindset into where your data is actually being stored. Like, do you really think about all the data you're giving out every single day? Do you think about how those companies are actually protecting their data? Do you think about how you yourself are protecting this data, right? I'll tell you a little bit about the, let's say, most interesting, I would say, attacks, hacks from the perspective of myself actually, and how they can actually impact your life. And then we'll move on how the backup can actually help you to avoid some of it.
All right, now it's 2:30 and we can start. Where is my data is the main topic for the next 30 minutes. TOMASZ TUREK is our speaker. Please, the floor is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So just to introduce myself again, my name is TOMASZ TUREK. I represent Veeam Software. And as I said, today I want to talk to you about data in general. So I will not be talking about Veeam as such for the most part of the presentation or how backup will improve your life, but just to show you how you should actually consider the data, how you should think about what you're doing in your everyday life. So this is actually a very cool map that I found. It was created by Karna botnet. It's actually an illegally made map that was created in 2012. And it's a botnet that actually checked every network-connected device it could reach in 24 hours. So this was made in 2012. It reached 1.3 billion network devices, right? You can see right here how it also changed during the day and night. So it's like 1.3 billion devices that probably have some storage, probably process some data, probably exchange the data between one another. So it's the 1.3 billion devices that we have to actually consider in terms of what happens if this data goes to the wrong place, what happens if this data is lost, what happens if somebody steals this data, simply, right? When you think about how you really manage your data, you have your phone, you connect to the internet, you see a free Wi-Fi, you're like, okay, great, let's just access it, right? But do you really think about the same things when you, for example, send something online, when you have a picture? I mean, where's this picture stored? Who protects it? How does he protect it? What happens if somebody loses this picture of yours? If you send it to the cloud, will you be able to recover it? And for you, it's just like one point to another. You send something somewhere. Well, in fact, if you look at this map, it can be any of those devices actually receiving the data that you've sent. So coming on to your everyday life, you do have a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone. And does anyone have a cell phone that's not connectable to the internet here today? There's one person. So the first point does, or two people. So the two people, you don't have to care about the first point because you're basically safe in that case, right? But you have a cell phone that's connected to the internet. You probably have it connected to some cloud service. You probably maybe have your documents also synced with your cell phone, right? So you use it every single day. You take pictures out of it. You can see right here, here's a picture of a Pope's visit, actually. You can also see it in every single concert. You film with it, right? You make pictures of random people, maybe pictures you never look at again, but those pictures are somewhere, right? Again, what happens if they're stolen? What happens if you lose those pictures? Perhaps it might be a little bit, well, important. You have the laptop. Again, laptop is something you use every day. You use it at work, you use it for your everyday life. So it can tell you a little bit about your habits, how you turn it on, how you turn it off, what kind of applications are you using. Again, what networks are you connecting to? Same thing, of course, for tablets. And what do you do with those devices? Let's start with a very basic thing. For example, you have a company laptop. The sequencing of when you turn it on, turn it off can tell you exactly, well, almost exactly when you actually start working, right? If you're an office person, you don't travel a lot, I can tell that every single time you open your laptop at 9 a.m. and you close it at 5 p.m. So what does that tell me? That for those 8 hours, you're there, right? You're not traveling, you're not at home, you're not doing anything else, you're simply sitting at work. So it's a little bit of a habit you can get from the very simple thing of just turning a device on and off. Second thing is a connection to the network. As I mentioned, when we see a free network, we connect to it pretty much automatically because we're like, okay, great, free Wi-Fi, especially if you're traveling. Again, we don't really think about the security of this network. We just consider that if somebody gives us a network, perhaps it's a company that we know, it is secure. But then again, this network can also trace you, right? So you have some positioning, even if you don't have GPS turned on, even if you have mobile data connectivity turned off. Well, if you just go around switching into some networks, you know the exact path of where you were moving, right? So again, it's an information about you. Another thing, playing games, for example, on your phone. How many of you know Pokemon Go? So the recently very, let's say, popular game. Actually, in certain scenarios, this game was banned pretty much because there were cases of soldiers in secret bases actually catching Pokemon. And you know, there's this screen where you can actually catch a Pokemon, you have a camera there, and you can actually take a photo of it. Well, technically, this photo is nowhere, right? Because you caught the Pokemon and it's out. But the truth is, do you really know that this is not used in any way at all? Second thing, Pokemon Go, again, as a game, for example, uses your location, right? You have to walk around, you hatch those Pokemon. So there is location data that's being actually processed. And this location data is also sent somewhere else. It's not staying only on your phone. How do we know that? Because they ban people for using fake GPSs. So they know that you have a fake GPS, so they have to actually process the data of where you're walking and your daily habits. So if you, again, walk every single day between certain hours, between certain locations, you can get a certain habit from a person and then perhaps use this information just like we heard in the last presentation. For example, stalking someone for a longer amount of time just to steal their possession. And of course, we use social media, but this is a whole other subject. So this is a data that you willingly present. Like, for example, you go to Facebook, you check in, okay, I'm in DSS ITSEC in Latvia. So we know that you're at this conference. Again, we're pretty certain you're not anywhere else. Perhaps you take a picture and send it online. Perhaps this picture has geolocation. Again, another, let's say, piece of information that was given willingly by you. And because in today's conference we're also talking about the Internet of Things and how everything is connected, we can also think about the less obvious sources of information. For example, who has a smartwatch? Anybody here? So there are a couple of people who have a smartwatch. If you look at the smartwatch, it's basically a small computer, right? It can have internet access, it can have navigation, there are some applications running on it, it can get your SMS messages, your emails, for example. And do you really think about protecting your smartwatch the same way as you would protect your phone, for example? I mean, it's just a watch, right? Of course, there are people who think about it seriously, but most people are just like, okay, it's a device, right? What can go wrong? Possibly. Another thing you might have to look at is your car. I mean, cars are getting smarter. For example, I'm driving with my friend recently, and you know he has this all, let's say, boosted in terms of all the features BMW. And there are a few things that actually caught my attention. First of all, the concierge services or the services in general. Like we're driving and there's a lady calling him, hello, your car told us that your oil level is low, so please change it in your service. So we're like, okay, so the car actually monitored the car status, it sent the information, somebody got this information, processed it, and we don't know, was it safe somewhere? Maybe not. From my point of view, it's an information that's not that important, but to someone, to some larger analytics, perhaps it can be used in some other way. If you look at the safety features that we have today, for example, how many, or perhaps have you seen just how it works, the autonomic driving, for example, or pre-collision features? There are two ways of doing that. First of all, you use a radar or laser. Second of all, you can use cameras. If you're using cameras, you're actually getting some kind of an image. Again, you think that this image is just like real-time only, it's not saved anywhere, but in reality, we don't know, right? Is it sent there? Is it not sent there? Maybe next day you just wake up, somebody installed something in your car, and they actually can get this image from your car safety features. Another thing again, anti-theft. One of my friends was actually going to regular maintenance. They put his car up just to see what's going on. And then suddenly they call him, okay, so the alarm started going on. We cannot turn it off, and the key doesn't work. Why? Because he has this external service of people trying to, let's say, figure out if his car is getting stolen. And because somebody raised his car, the automatic conclusion was that it's being stolen. So he had to call a third-party company and ask them, could you please turn off the alarm in my car? Could you please open the car? Because actually, there's just regular maintenance going on. So again, like pieces of information, they're just flowing in between different places. Smart cards, this is simple. Every time you just click it somewhere, you give a piece of your, again, habit, every single day habit. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, this is actually changing, is the home appliances. Take a look at a fridge, a smart fridge that's connected to the internet that scans everything that you have in your inventory, right? It can tell you pretty much a lot about a person, right? If a person has only burgers for the last couple of years, perhaps he's not going to be healthy. Perhaps it's an information for an insurance company. Maybe you should start taking care of that person, right? If you're suddenly buying cheaper and cheaper products, and we know it because we scan the barcodes, it gives us an information perhaps about the financial status of this person. Did he change his habits, or can he perhaps not afford it anymore, right? So those are just like tiny pieces of information, again, that you should consider. And this was just a personal life that we talked about. But if you look at, let's say, the more general distribution of data. So for example, you go to a bank. Anything you want to do in a bank, first of all, give me your ID. Can I scan your ID? Give me your name, date of birth, some additional documents so I can confirm your identity, right? So all this data is actually being stored somewhere. Of course, we consider the bank to be a very safe place to store this data, but we don't know it, right? We just left the data, and this is basically it. Insurance companies, financial institutions, again, everybody requires this data. If you look at, for example, a hospital, you go there again, they have your entire health history. So this is data that's, of course, sensitive from this perspective, not maybe of being costly data, but perhaps so private that it can be used to blackmail people, right? So if this data was somehow lost or stolen, I mean, you cannot really put a price on it, right? It's just a piece of data that you want to make sure that it's there, that it's safe. Go to hotels. I mean, for some of us, traveling is like an everyday habit, right? You go to a hotel, you check in, so of course, again, name, last name, date of birth, nationality, some document, and of course, credit card information, right? This is normal. They just want to do like a pre-approval on your card. So basically, again, all this information is at the hotel, and there have been numerous cases when this was stolen. So it's something, again, we should consider if we just want to give this information out freely, or should we perhaps have like a special card for the hotel just with some particular limit. So virtually everyone has our data. Also, if you log into some websites, I mean, some websites require registration forms. Of course, they don't check the consistency of those forms. They don't check if you're telling the truth, but many people fill out the true information about you. And if you're going to some random website, I mean, do you really know how they protect their data? Because it can be a huge, nice data center. It can be a single guy sitting in a basement with his computer, and the website is running there. We don't know that. Is it encrypted? Is it not encrypted? What happens if I lose this data? Is he going to use it in any way? Of course, there is this legal checkbox. Yes, I agree that you can use my data, but within the boundaries of law. But, I mean, it's a checkbox, right? It's just like PowerPoint. It can take everything, right? You can write anything you want, basically. And then we go to the point of where is this data stored that we actually create? First of all, nowhere. So basically anything we do in real time, we believe that this data is not stored anywhere, right? So as I told, the car safety feature, for example, you browse the internet, you look at some pictures, and then you close the browser. That's it, right? The picture is not there anymore. Of course it's there, right? It was cached, it's probably dropped onto your local drive. Perhaps somebody else cached your activity. So even though you don't have this data, someone else already might be using it. So there is no such thing as data being absolutely nowhere. Then if you look at local devices, for example, I have my laptop, I go online, perhaps I download some documents or I create a document, I close it. So, of course, I'm safe because I saved my data, I already have it, but there are two primary things that can happen. A very common scenario is that simply this laptop is stolen. Just like we heard in the last presentation, there can be even guys just stalking you just to take your data. Second thing can be a network breach because you connect this laptop somewhere. Of course, every single time you connect to a network that's not protected, you never know what's going to happen. Then the second level, let's say, of protection is you have some sort of a NAS at home. So you keep it locally, and then you make a backup, for example, to your NAS appliance. Most of people feel already so safe because we have a secondary location for our data. Of course, it's much harder to have physical access to this data, but again, it's a NAS at home. Of course, there are a lot of people who actually know how to protect their network, but most people don't know about different encryption times, password strength. I mean, what kind of a password is easier or harder to breach. Some don't even put a password on their network, right? So perhaps this device is still accessible to absolutely everyone. So then we go to an external, I put a data center, but let's say external storage. So you just ask some company, perhaps not yet a cloud provider, but a company, okay, can you keep a copy of my data, right? And I finally feel secure because if I'm offloading my data to a secondary location, I know that it's a company that actually knows what they are doing. Unless I put it into some search engine, okay, where can I store my data? I go to the 7th page of my search engine, I find the cheapest offer of a company I've never heard of. Again, do I know really where this data is stored? They may have an address, they may have a data center, but I have no idea if it's really there. And this is what actually might happen. When we store the data somewhere, we think about a beautiful data center. In fact, what's stopping someone from simply downloading this data onto their local computer, processing it in plain text, and just having it there sitting around, right? If you're looking at cloud, which is the last option that I've left here, especially if you look at the large cloud providers, you cannot really go wrong, right? If you send it to Microsoft or to Amazon, I mean, those guys are professionals, so if you send the data there, the chances for losing this data or for the leakage of this data are probably the smallest, right? Because even if the center goes down, they can geologically just simply spread the data into other data centers. So different levels of protection actually give you also different feelings of security, but you still have to remember that it's your data, right? If somebody else loses it, of course you can sue them, you can be angry at them, but it's still your data that was initially lost. And a couple interesting things that I found in terms of what was happening last year and this year in terms of data breaches, leaks, security problems. I found this website, maybe you can visit later on. It's a very cool graphical representation of the biggest data breaches that we had in the last couple of years, right? So you have those bubbles lying around saying how much data was actually affected or how many people were affected by a specific breach. And out of this website and also out of other sources, I found a couple pieces of information that I found really interesting. First of all, in the US, we had almost 70 million prisoner phone calls which were leaked. So first you think about, okay, it's like prisoner phone calls leak, like what's the problem with it, right? First of all, it's a phone call, right? So technically it's like a communication between two people, and those prisoners did not lose their citizen rights or anything like it. So there's the confidentiality of communication. Second thing, if you're communicating to your lawyer, which by law you cannot listen to such conversation even if you're a police officer, maybe perhaps this data also leaked, right? So there's a problem of us even talking on the phone. What happens if somebody is recording our phone calls and those phone calls actually leak? I mean, do we really consider what's going to happen? Probably not. Another thing, let's go to the US, let's say, presidential campaign right now, of course, not directly. The Tramp Hotels. Again, I told you about how you go to the hotel, leave the information there, right? The Tramp Hotels were actually hacked into, I believe it was actually still this year, and they had a couple thousand credit card information along with the information of the users of those credit cards actually stolen, right? So it's enough to take a loan, for example, in certain countries. It's enough to actually take the money off a specific credit card, right? So it's something you do every day. Just leave a card at a hotel, you think it's safe, boom, actually somebody just cleaned out your account because they actually hacked the hotel where you were staying. Sensitive information, Ashley Madison. You all know the portal and what it was used for. So the idea here is that all the personal data that you had there was actually leaked out. So this is not really a financial loss to anybody, but again, just like the health records, look at the sensitivity of this information, right? The blackmailing potential of the people who actually got this 37 million addresses of people who were visiting the website for various reasons, right? I mean, possibilities are endless, how you can use this data. Honestly, endless. Another thing, talking about health. UCLA health records were stolen. And again, health records can mean everything from your regular checkup to maybe your some long-term sickness, perhaps some problems which might affect your future, perhaps affect your work. Again, blackmailing potential is absolutely huge. And probably the biggest way of blackmailing a person is having their entire life actually in front of you. And OPM, I'm not sure if you know this company, it was a company that was doing background checks for people with top secret access in the US government, for example, like military access, things like this. So they did background checks, they stored this data, they were responsible for telling people who is allowed to actually get those certificates, access this top secret data. So even if you look at those low-level access certificates, you have to give a lot of information about yourself there, right? Who you're communicating with, from which country, is it on a daily basis? How often do you drink? Do you smoke? How often do you smoke? I mean, are you having a single, let's say, relationship, or are you a more open person? It's very sensitive information, and the deeper you go into those security certificates, the more information you actually give away about yourself. The insurance leak, again, same thing pretty much as the health records. Everything you already given the insurance company, so all your records, let's say, of accidents, of sicknesses is there, plus all the data of the people who were actually even kicked out, let's say, of the insurance is there, with the reason itself. So perhaps no other insurance company will take you anymore because they have everything in there. Going a little bit further, Ukraine power grid blackout. It's actually a denial of service attack that was ran against Western Ukraine, but it was actually a result of an attack that happened, I believe it was 6 months earlier, right? So 6 months earlier, somebody got access to their systems, and then after half a year, when nobody is expecting it, because even if there was a breach, perhaps, okay, they found nothing was stolen, great, and after 6 months, suddenly the power plants shut down. Just like that. Swift vulnerability. So this is a bit of an overstatement because Swift as such is fairly secure, but there was a case when a Bangladeshi banker was actually hacked, and from his computer there were financial messages sent through Swift actually carrying out over $81 million out of a bank. Right? So technically it's something that shouldn't happen because the authentication there should be fairly good, right? Because a banker should not be able to just take money and just send it to some offsite location. And the last thing that I left, because it fits, let's say, my expertise the best, is the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. And they had a problem as a public institution of somebody accessing their data and actually putting a crypto locker on it. So they encrypted the files and said, okay, you can buy it for $17,000. So for a public institution, a hospital, I mean, such an amount of money is pretty huge, right? And again, this is data that might be life-saving to some patients, right? Of course, it's not only history, it's current treatment, things like this. And because their data was not secure, so they had no way of protecting from the attack, and then they had no way of actually recovering the data, they actually had to pay the money, right? And this is where, as I said, backup actually fits into security, because if you're attacked with a crypto locker, if you have a data protection solution that can actually recover this data in just a couple minutes, why bother with those people, right? Why pay the money when you can actually get this data by yourself? And we also did a survey about the cost of security, so to speak. So basically the cost of downtime in terms of exactly, as I said, like, for example, crypto locker, which basically kills your company. So as you can see right here, South Africa responded that for them annually, it's the most expensive to have downtime. And we took into account the average cost of a downtime. We asked people in certain countries. We took the average number of downtimes that they have and the duration of the downtime. So you can see right here, it actually goes in millions. So Switzerland is the least one with $1.3 million, which is still more than enough to kill a lot of companies if they have a downtime like this every single year. And up to South Africa, where you get over $30 million of cost every single time you have downtime. But the second thing we have to consider, if you're talking about security, downtime, and not being able to recover the data, is what you're really afraid of. As a brand, of course, you're afraid of losing customer confidence, right? Would you really go into a company that just had a huge data leak and you absolutely know that they are not secure? Probably not. Even though they may have upgraded the security system, perhaps they have put a lot of money into it, you just don't care. You want to be secure. You want a company that has a flawless record in such area. If you look at later on, brand integrity, so this is basically also connected to the first statement, like losing customer confidence. The brand itself might be already destroyed, so maybe you have to rename the company. You have to, again, spend like millions of dollars just to build up this confidence again. But the third point is actually interesting. The managers are afraid of losing their employees' confidence. So a company can run in crisis situations even if the clients don't believe in it, but when the employees stop believing in it, I mean, it's just like a downfall, basically, of anything. And not only company, but if you look at social lives, if you are skeptical about doing something, you just don't put your heart in it, right? So even though it sounds like weird that employee confidence may have an effect on you, it's actually there. So as you can see, this downtime can really impact your environment, your life, your company. So to finish up, as I said, I represent Veeam Software. We're actually a data management company. We focus on backup, replication, offsite backups, data availability, high availability of virtual machines stationed in VMware and Hyper-V environments, right? So we deal with virtualization because this is what companies are using more and more. We're also moving into the physical area with the agents that will be released soon. So even if you're not thinking, let's say, big on a company level, but you're thinking on your own level of this laptop that might be stolen, that you might get this information leaked somewhere, there are tools that can help you protect from it. There are tools that can, for example, save you from ransomware. This is it from my side. Thank you very much for listening. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to hear. Thank you.